China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has called for a two-state solution and more effective mediation efforts to solve the conflict in Gaza. He was addressing world leaders at the Munich Security Conference, where the fighting between Israel and Palestine is dominating the talks. Officials in Gaza say the Palestinian death toll is approaching 29,000, and there is growing pressure on Israel from many countries, including some of its closest allies, not to expand its ground offensive into the border town of Rafah.
The Palestinian people have been displaced for generations and are still unable to return to their homes. This is the longest-lasting injustice in modern times. China firmly stands on the side of fairness and justice, works hard for a ceasefire, and does its best to protect civilians. Push the Security Council to adopt the first resolution since the outbreak of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and issue a position paper on the political settlement of the Palestinian-Israeli issue. China calls for accelerating the establishment of an independent Palestinian state and convening a larger-scale and more effective international cooperation conference so that the peaceful coexistence of Palestine and Israel can be truly realized.
Our correspondent Natalie Carney is there in Munich. Natalie, what more can you tell us about what the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi had to say?
Yes, he did broach a number of security situations around the world in his about 15-minute speech. Of course, the situation in Gaza, where he called on, he presented Beijing's position, calling for an immediate ceasefire of the situation and to lift any blockades on humanitarian corridors, as well as to hold international peace conference to revive this two-state solution. On the issue of Ukraine, he said that China was working tirelessly to find a political solution to the crisis, but that both countries needed to have their security issues recognized. He also touched on relations with the U.S. and even touched on how China was part of the reconciliation between Saudi Arabia and Iran and how that's sort of helped bring the Middle East closer together. On the sidelines today here in Munich, Foreign Minister Wang Yi also met with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, as well as the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Joseph Borell. The two exchanged views on the situation in Ukraine and in Gaza and spoke about how China and the EU could work closer together to help with the challenges of this much more chaotic and uncertain world.
China and Europe, as the world's two major forces, two major civilizations and markets, should be aware of the international responsibilities both undertake. A more stable and closer China-Europe relationship will be beneficial to each other and also the whole world. We should avoid the interference of geopolitics and ideology, adhere to the positioning of partners rather than rivals, and work together to inject positive energy to cope with the turbulent situation and provide a new direction to overcome the difficulties together.
Natalie, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy has also been speaking at that conference there. This is happening as Kiev's troops withdraw from the key eastern town of Avdiivka. Did he talk about that, and what are his demands of Ukraine's allies?
Yes, he did speak of that situation. His army chief basically gave him the news that he was going to withdraw troops from Avdiivka just hours before Zelensky took to the stage here in Munich. Zelensky called that decision the right choice, saying saving lives of Ukrainian soldiers is their top priority. He also spoke about the difficulties in finding rotation for these soldiers who are very, very tired. And there was even the subject of potentially lowering the age of conscription in Ukraine. But during his actual address, he spoke about returning to a rules-based world order in 2024 in which security could be a reality again. He did thank his allies very much for their attitude towards Ukrainian refugees, millions of people that have been forced to flee the country, and also, of course, for the substantial military assistance that the U.S. and that Europe has provided, but did stress the very important need for weaponry, calling it an absence of weapons.
We can get our land back, and Putin can lose. And this has already happened more than once on the battlefield. Dear friends, unfortunately, keeping Ukraine in the artificial deficit of weapons, particularly in deficit of artillery and long-range capabilities, allows Putin to adapt to the current intensity of the war. This self-weakening of democracy over time undermines our joint results.
He also had a very busy day on the sidelines here in Munich, meeting with the prime ministers of Denmark, as well as the Netherlands and the prime minister of Bangladesh. He also spent some time with the U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris. The two had a press conference after, in which Zelenskiy said that the delay in humanitarian aid to the Ukraine was not considered a betrayal. He understood that there's internal politics happening in the United States, but that, of course, is more concern for the Europeans if the U.S. do delay or reduce their support to Ukraine.